The Vorthak cruiser's eviscerator cut through the void like a blade of dark steel, its silver-purple energy cores pulsing with the rhythmic hum of military-grade power systems. The ship's brutalist architecture, all sharp angles and fortified bulkheads, spoke of a civilization that had never known peace, only the ceaseless grind of war. Commander Vorgul stood on the observation deck. His armored fingers curled around the railing, his violet ocular implants scanning the desolate expanse of space. The humans called this sector the graveyard, a fitting name. The wreckage of ancient battles drifted here, frozen in the endless dark, shattered hulls, gutted warships, the skeletal remains of civilizations long extinct. And yet, buried beneath the debris, something had stirred. Not the garbled transmissions of a dying machine, but a Vi's living signature. A human life sign, impossibly preserved. Vorgul's mandibles twitched in irritation. The Vorthak High Command had ordered him to investigate, but he had expected nothing more than another derelict. Another corpse. Humans were weak, fragile, their flesh tore too easily, their bones shattered under pressure. They had no place in the galaxy's hierarchy. "Commander," came the rasping voice of Gromnak, the chief xenobiologist. The scientist's exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lighting, his segmented limbs clicking as he approached. "We've located the source. It's a cryopod, Terran design." Vorgul exhaled through his secondary vents, the sound a low metallic hiss. "How old?" "At least 3 centuries. That gave him pause. 300 years in stasis should have reduced any organic to a withered husk. Yet the pod's readings indicated stable vitals. No decay, no degradation. "Bring it aboard," Vorgul ordered. The retrieval was swift. The pod, encrusted with ice and scarred by micrometeorite impacts, was hauled into the eviscerator's dissection bay. The Vorthak soldiers handled it with mechanical precision, their movements devoid of curiosity. To them, it was just another specimen. Gromnak activated the pod's external scanners, his ocular implants flickering as data streamed across his vision. "Fascinating," he muttered. "The cryogenic matrix is primitive, but the preservation is flawless." Vorgul stepped closer, his shadow falling over the pod's frosted surface. Through the ice, he could make out the silhouette of a human male, broad-shouldered, his features locked in unnatural stillness. A soldier, judging by the remnants of a uniform fused to his skin. "Wreck him," Vorgul commanded. Gromnak hesitated. "Commander, we don't know what prolonged stasis has done to his physiology. He could be, wreck him." The scientist obeyed. The pod hissed as its systems disengaged, the ice fracturing like glass. A rush of vapor spilled onto the deck, and for a moment, nothing happened. A heartbeat, a single, shuddering breath. The human's eyes snapped open. Vorgul expected confusion, fear, disorientation. Instead, the man's gaze locked onto him with terrifying clarity. His pupils dilated, adjusting to the light in seconds. His fingers twitched, testing muscle memory, and then he smiled. It wasn't the smile of a man who had just woken from centuries of slumber. It was the smile of a predator who had been waiting. Gromnak took an involuntary step back, his exoskeleton plates rattling. "Commander, his vitals, they're accelerating." Vorgul's hand drifted toward his plasma sidearm. "Identify yourself." The human tilted his head, as if listening to something only he could hear. His voice, when it came, was rough from disuse, but laced with something darkly amused. "Corporal Adam McKay, Terran Special Forces." He flexed his fingers, cracking the ice still clinging to his knuckles. "And you? You're not my rescue team." The air in the dissection bay grew heavy. The Vorthak soldiers shifted, their weapon arms humming to life. Vorgul studied the human, really studied him, the way his muscles coiled with latent strength, the way his eyes tracked every movement in the room. This was no ordinary soldier. This was something else entirely. And for the first time in his long, battle-scarred life, Commander Vorgul felt the cold whisper of doubt. Perhaps the galaxy had underestimated humanity. Perhaps he had. "Seek Sitayon Toin." Ghost signal. The cryo chamber exhaled its last wisps of frozen vapor as Corporal McKay stepped forward, his bare feet leaving melted prints on the steel deck. The Vorthak soldiers tightened their formation, their weapon arms humming with silver, purple charge, but the human didn't react to the threat. His gaze swept the dissection bay like a predator cataloging exits. Gromnock's neural tendrils flickered with unease. The readings on his scanner made no sense. The human's bio signatures were wrong. His cells burned with metabolic activity far beyond baseline Terran physiology, his neural pathways crackling with synaptic fire. This wasn't revival, this was awakening. Vorgul's mandibles tightened. He had dissected a dozen species, watched warriors twice McKay's size beg for mercy under his blades. Yet the way the human moved, fluid, deliberate, like a blade unsheathing, triggered something primal in his hindbrain. Prey recognition. McKay's fingers twitched. The motion was almost casual, but Vorgul's combat implants flagged it a micro gesture, a soldier's habit. Assessing weapon proximity. Calculating engagement angles. Your stasis pod was adrift in the graveyard belt for centuries, Gromnock said, his voice modulator flattening to hide his unease. Your people are gone. The Terran Empire fell long before we. McKay's laugh was a short, sharp sound. Empire. He rolled the word in his mouth like it was a joke. Lady Emagan's gonna love that. The Vorthak exchanged glances. Gromnock's scanner chirped, a secondary alert, buried in McKay's subdermal layers. Nanites stirred. Not medical, not civilian. A military grade. A Vorgul's combat hood flared crimson. The human's pupils had dilated, his irises flickering with faint bioluminescence. Genetic modification. Cybernetics. Then McKay's head snapped toward the ceiling. A heartbeat later, the ship's alarms screamed. The Krathvorax shuddered as something hit. Not a weapon, but a signal, a pulse of raw data screaming through the comm arrays. The lights flickered, violet emergency strips bleeding into red. Gromnock's console exploded with warnings. Commander! An encrypted transmission just hijacked our systems. It's Terran origin! McKay's smile didn't reach his eyes. Told you I wasn't alone. Vorgul's claws unsheathed. The signal was slicing through their firewalls like they were paper, unpacking itself in their databanks. A voice, female and razor-edged, crackled through the ship's speakers. Attention Vorthak vessel. This is Commander Amanda Emagan of the Terran Dreadnought at Pale Horse. Say you have something of mine. The view screen lit up. Outside, where empty void had stretched seconds before, space rippled. Something vast and angular phased into existence, its hull black as a singularity, its prow bristling with cannons that made the Krathvorax's armaments look like toys. McKay cracked his neck. Yeah, you guys really fucked up. Vorgul's doubt crystallized into cold, cloying dread. The galaxy hadn't just underestimated humanity, it had forgotten them. Cetian 30, THEUNSEN fell EET. The Krathvorax shuddered as if the void itself had taken a breath and held it. Vorgul's claws dug into the command console, his silver, purple plating reflecting the impossible sight unfolding beyond the view screen. Where there had been nothing. Nothing. Now loomed the Pale Horsey. It was not just a ship, it was a statement. The dreadnought's hull drank in the starlight, a matte black so deep it seemed to warp space around it. Angular and brutal, its design bore none of the sleek, predatory curves of Vorthak warships. This was a blade forged for annihilation, every edge sharpened for maximum devastation. Along its flanks, weapon batteries pulsed with a dull, ominous glow, not the harsh silver, purple of Vorthak plasma, but something colder, darker. Gromnock's data slate clattered to the deck. His frilled neck crest flared in alarm as sensor readings scrolled across the main display. Commander, these energy signatures, Vorgul, didn't need the readings. His eyes traced the pale horse's silhouette, the way its prow split open like the jaws of some ancient leviathan, revealing rows of spinel-mounted cannons. Each one thrummed with power, their cores flickering a venomous crimson. Humanity had not just survived the long silence. They had evolved. McKay leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. His grin was a predator's, all teeth, no warmth. Told you we weren't extinct. Vorgul's secondary heart stuttered. The pale horse was bad enough, but then the Ella's ripples began. Space behind the dreadnought shivered, like heat distortion over a desert. One by one, more ships phased into existence, smaller, but no less lethal. Frigates with holes like serrated knives, cruisers studded with missile pods. Gunships that moved with eerie, insectile precision. Terran fleet, Gromnock's voice was a whisper. Their stealth tech. It's not just masking emissions. They're bending's reality. Vorgul's mind raced. The Vorthak Dominion had ruled this sector for centuries, their fleets unmatched, their technology supreme. Yet these humans, these Terrans, had slipped past every patrol, every sensor net, as if the void itself conspired to hide them. The comm crackled again. Vorthak vessel. Commander Emigan's voice was ice-wrapped in velvet. You will return, Corporal McKay. Immediately. Vorgul's claws flexed. Surrender was not in his nature. But neither was suicide. He opened a channel. This is High Commander Vorgul of this Krathvarax. You are in violation of Dominion space. Stand down, or... A sound cut him off. McKay was laughing. You don't get it, do you? The human pushed off the wall, his amusement fading into something colder. This isn't a negotiation. That. He jerked his chin at the view screen. That's as mercy. The pale horse could reduce you to atoms before you even knew it was there. A new alert blared. The tactical display updated, and Vorgul's blood ran to ice. The Terran fleet wasn't just surrounding them. It was everywhere. Hundreds of contacts flickered to life across the system, hidden kill ships, lying in wait like wolves in the dark. The Dominion's vaunted border defenses hadn't just failed. They'd never even seen the threat coming. Gromnock's frills lay flat against his skull. Commander, we are outmatched. Vorgul exhaled, his pride warring with survival. He had studied human history, their wars, their stubborn refusal to break. He had dismissed them as relics. Now he understood. The galaxy hadn't just forgotten humanity. It had slept while the Terrans sharpened their knives. He opened the comm. Stand down all weapons. The words tasted like ash. But better ash than annihilation. The silence in the Vorthak Command Center was absolute. The only sound was the faint hum of the ship's core, a rhythmic pulse of silver, purple energy that now felt mocking in its steadiness. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his command throne, the reinforced alloy groaning under the pressure. His frills, usually rigid with authority, lay flat against his skull, a primal response to the predator now circling his fleet. On the tactical display, the Terran warships moved with chilling precision. They did not rush. They did not broadcast threats. They simply existed, their positions shifting like chess pieces sliding into checkmate. Gromnock's voice was a whisper, barely audible over the static of the comms. They're hurting us, Vorgul knew it. Every ship in his flotilla was being maneuvered into a kill box, their escape vectors systematically erased. The Terrans had anticipated their retreat paths, their countermeasures, even their desperation. A single blip on the edge of the scanner, moving too fast for targeting locks to stabilize. The pale horse had not come alone. A new vessel tore into real space, its silhouette sleek and predatory, its hull a matte black that drank in the light. Unlike the Dominion's angular, utilitarian warships, this one was all curves and jagged edges, like a blade forged in shadow. Gromnock's claws dug into the console. Another Terran ship. Vorgul's mandibles clenched. No. This was something worse. The vessel didn't broadcast an ide. It didn't hail them. It simply airs accelerated, streaking toward the nearest Vorthak cruiser with a velocity that defied physics. Alarms shrieked. Shields flared violet as the Dominion ship scrambled to react. The black ship rammed through the cruiser's flank like a bullet through flesh. Armor plating buckled. Atmosphere vented in a silent scream. And then, The detonation, not from the impact. From inside, the cruiser's core detonated in a bloom of silver fire, the shockwave rippling outward in perfect, concentric rings. The black ship emerged unscathed, its hull unmarred, already pivoting toward its next target. Vorgul's blood ran cold. This wasn't a warship. It was a hunter, and it had just drawn first blood. Gromnok's voice was hollow. They're not just surrounding us. They're culling us, Vorgul exhaled, the weight of his miscalculation pressing down on him like a dying star. The Terrans had not forgotten war, they had perfected it. SCST-015, HIGH Ka Mayan Pan XS. The command deck of the Dominion's Wrath was a tomb of flickering violet light and hushed terror. Vorgul stood motionless before the tactical display, his claws flexing against the cold steel of the console. The holographic projection painted his armored face in shifting silver, purpled hues, each pulse of light marking another Vorthak ship vanishing from the grid. They had come expecting to harvest a broken species. Instead, they had awakened something far worse. Gromnok's data slate clattered to the floor, the sound sharp in the suffocating silence. His cranial spines, usually rigid with confidence, lay flattened against his skull, a primal display of dread no Vorthak warrior could suppress. They're vectors, he rasped. They're not random. Every strike is surgical. They're dismantling us layer by layer. Vorgul's secondary heart pounded, a drumbeat of rising panic. The Terran vessels moved with a precision that bordered on obscene. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Each black ship carved through his fleet like a scalpel through flesh, targeting shield generators, engine clusters, command nodes. Not destruction. Disassembly. And at the center of it all, the lead vessel. The one they had foolishly dismissed as a derelict. It hung in the void now, a silent specter wreathed in the dying light of its victims. Its angular hull drank in the surrounding starlight, reflecting nothing. No energy signatures, no weapon ports, just hunger, given form. A junior officer, Korvath, his nameplate read, stumbled forward, his voice cracking. High Commander. The S-Eviscerator reports. Vorgul didn't let him finish. He already knew. The feed flickered to life on the main viewer, and the bridge crew recoiled as one. The Z-Eviscerator, a battlecruiser that had raised a dozen systems, was Z bleeding. Not from external damage, from within. Silver, purple flames licked through its corridors, but these were no ordinary fires. They moved with purpose, slithering along bulkheads, seeking out life signs. And where they touched, Vorthak warriors, scream it. Their armor melted like wax, their flesh blackened and curled away from bone. The humans hadn't just boarded them, they had infected them. Gromnok's voice was a whisper. They're not just killing us. They're making an example. Vorgul's claws dug into the console hard enough to score the metal. This wasn't warfare as the Dominion understood it. No honor, no grand fleet engagements, just cold, methodical annihilation. A new signal. The lead Terran ship pulsed once, a ripple of darkness across its surface. The comms array lit up, not with a transmission, but with AF data packet. Unencrypted, unfiltered, Gromnok hesitated, then opened it. The screen filled with a single image, a human skull, wreathed in thorned vines. Beneath it, blocky glyphs, Terran script, translated automatically by the ship's systems. YOUTHUGHT what we warp here Y. OWERETHURS. Then from the depths of the Dominion's wrath, a sound no Vorthak had ever uttered in battle. Vorgul turned his gaze back to the void, where the Terran fleet advanced, inexorable as a tide. They had come to conquer a graveyard. Instead, they had stirred the dead. Section 6. The Dreadnought speaks. The silence on the Dominion's wrath was thick enough to choke on. Vorgul's secondary heart thrummed in erratic pulses, his neural tendrils flickering with involuntary distress signals. The image of the skull lingered on every screen, its hollow gaze a mockery of Vorthak's superiority. The thorns coiled around it weren't mere decoration, they were a statement. A prophecy. Gromnok's claws trembled over the console. The data packet had contained more than just the image. Buried beneath layers of archaic Terran code were schematics. Blueprints of the monstrosity now bearing down on them. The Indomitable, as the humans called it, wasn't just a warship. It was a relic. A ghost. High Commander. Gromnak rasped, his voice modulator crackling with static. The vessel's core signature, it predates the fall. By centuries. Vorgul's spine stiffened. The fall, the cataclysm, that had supposedly shattered human civilization before the Dominion rose to power. The record spoke of a broken species, scrounging in irradiated ruins. Yet the Indomitable moved with the precision of a predator. A proximity alert shrieked. The Terran dreadnought had entered engagement range. Then, the void rippled. A distortion bloomed around the HFY's Indomitable. A shimmering field of violet, black energy that made the Dominion's scanners scream in protest. Gromnak's readouts dissolved into chaos. Their shields. They're not dispersing our scans. They're consuming them. Vorgul's mandibles clenched. No species had ever weaponized sensor interference. But the humans hadn't just weaponized it, they'd turned it into a taunt. A new signal pierced the static, not a transmission. Mechanical. Ancient. Vorthak vessel. The words weren't transmitted. They as vibrated through the hull, resonating in the metal like a struck gong. The crew recoiled, their exoskeletons humming in sympathetic resonance. Gromnak's translator spat fragmented text. Varo unknown dialect. Pre-fall linguistic patterns, warning semantic recursion detected. Far the voice continued, each syllable a hammer blow. You woke us. A flicker on the view screen. The Indomitable's pro split open, revealing a yawning maw of blackened alloy. Inside, something else glowed, not plasma, not energy. Bioluminescence. Gromnak's breath hitched. That's not a weapon port. It's a cryopod. The light pulsed, slow and rhythmic. A heartbeat, then with a sound like cracking ice, the pods opened. Vorgul's tactical display erupted with warnings. The Indomitable's power signature spiked, not from its reactors, but from dials within. From the pod, a figure emerged, clad in armor so old its edges had fused with the flesh beneath. The human stood motionless in the zero-gravity void. Its helmet was a faceless slab of black metal, its joints reinforced with cabling that twitched like living tendons. Gromnak's scanner identified it instantly. Subject. Cryo, enhanced combatant. Designation, Dreadnought class. Status active. The human's head tilted. Though it had no visible eyes, Vorgul felt its gaze. Then the Dreadnought spoke, not through comms, but directly into their minds, its voice scraping against their synapses like a blade. You thought time would weaken us. The Indomitable's weapons cycled online. You were wrong. And the void burned. SCT-on 7 sane. Empire Resubrate the void burned on. Vorgul's tactical display shattered into static as the Dazan Indomitable unleashed its fury. The Dreadnought's awakening had not merely activated the ship, it had awakened something else. Something buried deep within the vessel's core. The first volley was not plasma, not railgun fire, but something far worse. The Dreadnought's armor pulsed with silver, purple light, not the harsh, militaristic hue of Vorthak technology, but something older. Something hungry. The energy arsed across the hull like liquid lightning, coalescing into a single, monstrous beam that lanced toward the Vorthak flagship. Gromnak's instruments screamed. The beam was not pure energy, it was alive. A self-replicating swarm of nanites, each one a razor-edged parasite designed to burrow, to consume. Where it struck the flagship's shields, the barrier shrieked, its integrity collapsing like rotting flesh. Vorgul's claws dug into his command console. His ship was bleeding, his crew was dying. And the Dreadnought had not even moved. Inside the cryopod chamber, the air itself trembled. The Dreadnought's presence was a physical weight, pressing down on the Vorthak like a collapsing star. Gromnak's limbs locked in place, his neural implants overloading with proximity warnings. The human turned its faceless helm toward them. You studied us. The voice was not sound. It was a violation, carving itself into their minds. You thought you understood. A single armored finger twitched. The dreadnought's joints hissed, ancient hydraulics grinding back to life after centuries of stillness. The dreadnought's moved, and the laws of physics broke. One moment it stood before them. The next, it was inside the Vorthak ranks, its fist buried in a warrior's chest. The soldier didn't even have time to scream before his bodies disintegrated, his armor and flesh unraveling into ash. Gromnock's scanner finally registered the truth. The dreadnought was not just a soldier. It was our weapon, on the bridge of the Indomitable. Commander Amanda Imogen watched the carnage unfold through the ship's external feeds. The dreadnought moved like a force of nature, slaughtering the Vorthak with terrifying efficiency. But she saw something else. The way its movements stuttered. The way its armor flickered, as if struggling to contain the power within. Centuries of sleep had not weakened it. They had changed it. Corporal McKay's voice crackled over the comms. Commander, we've got a problem. The dreadnought's systems are unstable. If it keeps pushing like this, she already knew. The dreadnought was not just fighting, it was burning itself alive. Vorgul's flagship reeled, its hull buckling under the Indomitable's assault. The dreadnought's rampage had bought them time, but at a cost. Then, the impossible happened. The dreadnought stopped. Its faceless helm tilted upward, as if listening to a voice only it could hear. For the first time since its awakening it hesitated, and in that moment Vorgul saw his chance. He activated the fleet-wide command.
All ships, folks use fire!
The void screamed as 1,000 weapons turned toward the lighter's Indomitable. And the dreadnought smiled to be continued. Sesitio N8C, the prisoner, the Indomitable's sudden stillness was more unnerving than its rampage. Vorgul's flagship, the Storm's Edgy, hung in the void, its silver, purple hull bleeding energy from ruptured conduits. The dreadnought had carved through his fleet like a blade through flesh, its movements too fast, too alive for something so massive. And now it simply stopped. His secondary heart pounded in his chest, a primal rhythm of dread. On the tactical display, the human warship's silhouette pulsed with unstable energy, its core flickering between violet and a sickly, irradiated white. It wasn't just damaged, it was unraveling. Gromnock's voice crackled through the calm, the scientist's usual arrogance replaced by something colder. High Commander, scans indicate the dreadnought's reactor is entering cascade failure. It will detonate within minutes. Vorgul's claws flexed against the armrest of his command throne. Detonate. The word should have brought relief. Instead, it coiled like a serpent in his gut. Humans did not surrender. They burned. Aboard the Thea's Indomitable, Commander Amanda Imogen tasted blood. The dreadnought systems screamed in her skull, a symphony of failing reactors and dying machines. Centuries of sleep had not just preserved her, it had altered her. Neural interfaces meant for short-term use had fused with her synapses, turning the ship's pain into her own. She could feel the Vorthak fleet regrouping, their weapons charging. She could feel the dreadnought's core, tearing itself apart. Distant, her head snapped toward the source. The motion too sharp, too mechanical. The ship's sensors latched onto it instantly, a human life sign, buried deep in the wreckage of a Vorthak carrier. Her lips peeled back from her teeth. The Vorthak science vessel, Eclipse, Gromnock's laboratory, was a tomb of cold steel and violet light. The human lay on the examination slab, its body still encased in the remnants of its cryopod. Primitive by Vorthak standards, a crude metal coffin lined with frost, brittle circuitry. The readings were as wrong. Gromnock's secondary eyes narrowed as he studied the scans. The human cells were saturated with an unknown energy signature, its neural activity flickering like a dying star. Sleep was meant to preserve, not transform. A low groan echoed through the chamber. The human's eyes snapped open. Gromnock recoiled. The eyes were wrong, not the dull brown of baseline humans, but a luminous, radioactive blue. The human, of Corporal Adam McKay, according to the pod's faded insignia, twitched. Then, with a sound like cracking ice, it is sat up. Gronok's hand flew to his sidearm, the human's head tilted, and smiled. These aboard the Storm's Edgy, Vorgul's command throne shuddered as another explosion rocked the flagship. The Indomitable had not moved, had not fired. It simply hung there, its dying core casting jagged shadows across the wreckage of his fleet. A transmission, not from the dreadnought, from the Eclipse. Gronok's face filled the screen, his usually immaculate crest of spines flattened in terror. High Commander, the prisoner. The feed dissolved into static. When it cleared, a human stood where Gronok had been. Its eyes burned, Vorgul's blood turned to ice. The human's lips moved, and though the audio was dead, Vorgul heard. The words anyway, as if they had been carved directly into his skull. "She's coming." To be continued. Sicitium 9. Homefront Unis. The command deck of these Storm's Edgy was silent except for the intermittent crackle of dying systems. The air smelled of scorched metal and ionized plasma, the scent of a fleet in ruins. Vorgul's claws dug into the armrests of his throne, the dark steel groaning under his grip. His secondary heart pounded in his chest, a rapid, uneven rhythm he had not felt since his first blooding as a warrior. The screen before him remained frozen on the last image, the human's face, its eyes alight with something that was not quite madness, not quite fury, but something far worse. Purpose. "She's coming." The words echoed in his skull, a psychic imprint that refused to fade. Vorgul had faced horrors before. The void, beasts of the Kether expanse. The rogue war, minds of the shattered core. But this was different. This was not an enemy, this was a retribution. His officers stood rigid at their stations, their violet, accented armor, dulled by smoke and damage. None dared speak. The Indomitable still loomed in the viewport. Its shattered hull bleeding silver, purple fire, yet somehow impossibly alive. A low chime sounded from the tactical console. Vorgul forced himself to look. The scan was faint, distorted by the wreckage of his fleet, but unmistakable. A single vessel, small, sleek, moving at speeds no Vorthak ship could match, streaking toward the Storm's Edgy. The human warship did not slow, it did not deviate. It carved through the debris field like a blade through flesh, its hull shimmering with the telltale distortion of a gravity drive at full burn. Vorgul's spines flexed involuntarily. They had studied human psychology for decades. They had predicted their tactics, their limitations. But this was not strategy. This was not even war. This was vengeance. It as retress aboard the Eclipse, Gronok's laboratory was a ruin. The cryopod lay shattered, its reinforced glass scattered across the deck like jagged teeth. The containment field generators, designed to restrain creatures 10 times stronger than a human, had been torn from their mounts, their silver, purple cores dark and lifeless. And in the center of the devastation, the human stood. Corporal Adam McKay, that was the name on the pod's faded records. A soldier of the old wars, lost to time, preserved in ice and silence. Gronok had expected weakness, disorientation, a relic to be studied, pitied, perhaps even dissected. He had been wrong. The human's body was lean, corded with muscle that should have atrophied after centuries of stillness. But instead of decay, there was something more. His veins pulsed with a faint, bioluminescent glow nanite augmentation, Gronok realized with dawning horror. Not just preservation, an enhancement. And his eyes, they burned. McKay turned his head, slow and deliberate, as if relearning the motion. His gaze locked onto Gronok, and the scientist felt something primal uncoil in his gut. This was not a prisoner, this was a predator. McKay's lips curled, not a smile, a baring of teeth. A blur of motion too fast to track, and Gronok was airborne, his body slamming into the far wall with enough force to crack the reinforced plating. Pain flared through his carapace, but worse than the agony was the realization. The human had not even touched him. The airs itself had obeyed his will. McKay stepped forward, his bare feet silent on the metal deck. He tilted his head, studying Gromnak like a specimen under glass. "Where," he said, his voice a rasp of disuse, "is my commander?" Gromnak's mandibles clicked in useless terror. The human's eyes darkened. "Wrong answer. S. Aboard the S-Storm's edgy." The proximity alarm screamed. Vorgul's head snapped up as the unknown vessel, no, not unknown, of human, slammed into the Storm's Edge's dorsal hull. Not a collision, a docking maneuver. The deck shuddered, then came the sound. A rhythmic, echoing thud, like a heartbeat, if a heartbeat could shake a warship to its bones. Unstoppable, coming closer. Vorgul rose from his throne, his claws unsheathing. He was High Commander of the Vorthak Armada. He would not cower. The blast doors exploded inward. Smoke curled through the breach, and from it emerged a figure clad in tattered black armor, her face obscured by a helm of scarred ceramite. In one hand, she carried a blade wreathed in violet fire. In the other, Gromnak's severed head. The human commander, Amanda Magan, tilted her helm, studying Vorgul with the detached curiosity of a surgeon assessing a corpse. "You," she said, her voice a distortion of machine and flesh, "should not have touched my soldier." Behind her, the shadows moved. A Corporal McKay stepped into the light, his eyes burning like dying stars. Vorgul understood. Then, they had awakened something they could not put down, and the galaxy would burn for it. CTO-19. THET-NWAKES. The air in the command throne room tasted of ionized metal and spilled blood. The deck plating beneath Vorgul's talons still vibrated from the force of the blast doors being torn apart. Not by explosives, not by plasma cutters, but by ours hands. Human hands. Amanda Imagan took another step forward, her armored boots leaving smoldering prints in the steel. The violet fire of her blade cast jagged shadows across the walls, making the silver, purple sigils of the Vorthak Armada seem to writhe in distress. Behind her, McKay stood motionless, his breathing unnervingly steady. His eyes, those eyes, were wrong. Not the warm brown of a living soldier, but the hollow glow of something that had clawed its way back from the dark. Vorgul's secondary heart spasmed. He had seen warriors enhanced by cybernetics before. The Vorthak themselves had their neural augments, their reinforced skeletal weaves. But this was different. The humans hadn't just rebuilt McKay. They had remade him. Gromnak's head lay between them. The scientist's cranial spines still twitching with residual synaptic discharge. His expression was frozen in the moment of realization, too late, that dissecting a human soldier had been the last mistake he would ever make. Imogen tilted her head, the servos in her helm wearing softly. "You took him apart," she said, her voice a layered snarl of Vox distortion and something deeper, something that resonated in Vorgul's marrow. Sussex, piece by piece, to see what made him work. Behind her, McKay's fingers flexed. The air around him warped, as if reality itself recoiled from his presence. Vorgul forced his crest spines to remain rigid. He was High Commander. He would not show fear. But the humans had done something impossible. They had pulled one of their own from the abyss of death, and in doing so, they had forged something worse than a corpse. They had made as vengeance. Imogen raised her blade. The violet fire twisted, forming sigils in the air. Human script, Vorgul realized. A name. "You Adam McKay. You wanted to understand us," Imogen said. "So let me show you." She moved. Vorgul barely registered the blur of black ceramite before the first impact struck. His personal shield flared silver, purple, absorbing the blow. But the force still sent him skidding backward, his talons screeching against the deck. His tactical display screamed warnings, kinetic energy readings off the charts, armor integrity already compromised. McKay didn't rush in, he walked. Every step was deliberate, unhurried. The air around him shimmered with displaced heat, his augmented musculature humming with power. When he spoke, his voice was a chorus McKay's own. Yes, but beneath it, something elsey. Something vast. You cut me open, he said. But you never asked if I wanted to stay dead. Vorgul fired his wrist-mounted plasma caster. The blast should have vaporized McKay's torso. Instead, McKay caught it. His fingers closed around the superheated energy, the plasma swirling like liquid in his palm, before he crushed it into nothingness. His eyes burned brighter. Imogen struck again, her blade shearing through Vorgul's shield generator in a single stroke. The device exploded in a cascade of sparks, and for the first time in his life, Vorgul felt as naked. The humans had not just returned from death, they had brought something back with them, and now the galaxy would learn what that meant. CTO-1 Levantine. Verian Suar Nder. The command deck of the Vorthak flagship, Eternal Dominion, had been designed to inspire terror. Towering obsidian pillars pulsed with violet energy, their surfaces etched with the names of conquered worlds. The air hummed with the subsonic growl of warship engines, a sound meant to vibrate in the bones of lesser species, to remind them of their place. Vorgul had stood on this deck 1,000 times before, his armored boots planted on the steel mesh floor, his spine straight with the certainty of victory. Now he knelt. His carapace armor was cracked along the left flank, leaking viscous silver fluid. One of his secondary arms hung limp, severed at the elbow by Imogen's blade. The wound should have been cauterized. Plasma weaponry, always sealed as it cut. But the human weapon had left ragged edges, as if denying even that small mercy. Across from him, McKay stood motionless. The human was no longer just a human. His body was a conduit now, veins glowing beneath his skin like molten circuits. The air around him warped, as if reality itself struggled to contain whatever slept inside his flesh. Vorgul's remaining officers had their weapons trained on McKay. Pulse rifles, ion disruptors, even a singularity grenade, all useless. They knew it, he knew it, yet they aimed anyway. Pride was a difficult thing to surrender. Imogen stepped forward, her boots silent on the deck. She carried no weapon. She didn't need one. The blade she had wielded was gone, dissolved into the air after its final strike, as if it had only existed for that single, perfect cut. She stopped beside McKay, her gaze locked onto Vorgul. "You wanted to study us," she said. Her voice was calm, no anger, no gloating, just fact. "Now you have." Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He should have felt rage. He should have roared defiance. Triggered the flagship's self-destruct, taken them all into the void rather than kneel before creatures his people had once dismissed as primitives. But he didn't, because for the first time in his life, he understood fear. Not the sharp, fleeting terror of battle, but something deeper. Something that settled in the marrow. The fear of standing before something you could not comprehend, something that had looked into the abyss and dragged power back from it. McKay tilted his head. The motion was too smooth, too precise. "You're wondering what we are now," he said. His voice was still his own, but beneath it, something vast echoed. "So are we." A console behind Vorgul flickered. The holographic display of the battle, dozens of Vorthak warships, locked in combat with the Terran fleet, stuttered, then rewrote itself. One by one, the crimson markers of Vorthak vessels winked out. Not destroyed. Silenced. Agromnok, the chief scientist, staggered forward. His scanner array was still active, its violet readouts spiraling wildly. "They're not just winning," he rasped. "They're rewriting the rules." Imogen exhaled. Long and slow. "Surrender," she said. "Or we'll show you what happens when humanity stops holding back." Vorgul looked at his officers. At the shattered remains of his fleet. At the thing that had once been a human soldier, now standing between him and the stars. His spine, unbent for 100 battles, finally bowed. "We yield." The words tasted like ash. McKay smiled. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't kind. It was the smile of something that had seen beyond death and decided the galaxy wasn't ready for what came next. The silence that followed was heavier than the void between stars. Vorgul's command chamber, once a bastion of Vorthak supremacy, now felt like a tomb. The air hummed with residual energy, the scent of scorched metal and ionized plasma thick in his nostrils. His claws flexed against the armrests of his throne, the polished alloy groaning under the pressure. Across from him, the human, McKay, stood motionless. His armor was still slick with the remnants of battle, the dark plating absorbing the chamber's violet light rather than reflecting it. His eyes, though, those were wrong. Too bright, too aware. A Gromnock scanner chirped weakly, its readings erratic. The scientist's crest of spines had flattened entirely against his skull, his usual arrogance replaced by something far more primal. Fear. What are you? Vorgul finally asked, the words scraping from his throat like shrapnel. McKay tilted his head, considering the movement was too precise, too calculated. A relic, he said. His voice was layered, as if multiple frequencies spoke through him at once. A ghost. A warning. Behind him, the holographic display of the battlefield flickered. The Terran fleet had ceased fire, but their weapons remained primed. Their targeting arrays locked onto the remnants of the Vorthak armada. Imogen stepped forward, her boots clicking against the deck. She carried herself like a blade unsheathed, controlled, lethal, but not without purpose. You wanted to see what we were capable of, she said. Now you know. Vorgul's mandibles twitched. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had crushed species beneath his heel without hesitation. But this was different. The humans had not just fought. They had evolved. A McKay's presence was proof of that. The cryopod they had found him in had been ancient, its systems archaic by galactic standards. Yet when they had thawed him, expecting a weakened specimen, they had instead unleashed something far beyond their comprehension. Centuries of suspended animation had not dulled him. They had refined him. Gromnock's scanner finally stabilized, its readouts coalescing into a single, horrifying conclusion. His neural patterns, the scientist whispered. They're not just augmented, they're iterative. Has been dreaming, learning, adapting. McKay's smile returned, slow and knowing. You think time weakens us, he said. But we don't forget. We don't fade, we wait. The chamber's lighting dimmed, as if the ship itself recoiled from the implication. Vorgul understood now, the Terran Empire was not just a military power. It was an archive. A repository of every warrior, every strategist, every mind that had ever been deemed worthy of preservation. And now, awakened, Imogen folded her arms, her gaze unyielding. You have two choices, she said. Walk away, and never test us again. Or stay, and learn just how deep our history goes. Vorgul exhaled, the weight of centuries pressing down on him. For the first time in his long, brutal life, he felt small. The galaxy had thought humanity defenseless. It had been wrong, and now it would remember. McKay turned toward the viewport, where the stars burned cold and distant. The night is long, he murmured. But we've always been patient. And in the silence that followed, the Vorthak finally understood. They were not the hunters, they were the prey.